I've forgotten how wonderful these Washington summers can be. And Simon, I want to thank you for that introduction. My father would have been proud and my mother would have believed it. As Simon said, I had the good fortune to work with NDN on a paper on the mobile revolution. I wanted to briefly share some of the findings from that work. And the key premise of the paper was that Washington policymakers were, with the exception of astute people like Simon, were not really paying attention to the explosive growth of mobile technology in developing countries. And there were 4 trends that I thought were particularly important. One was obviously the explosive growth to the point where there are now over 3 billion customers that have access to mobile communications, which is expected to rise to over 5 billion by 2011. The second is the increased performance and functionality of what one mobile company called the device formerly known as the cell phone. As you know, because of Moore's law, because of the ability to double the number of integrated circuits, transistors on an integrated circuit every 12 to 18 months, what is yesterday's supercomputer is today's smartphone. So looking at not only what we can do with today's devices, but the increased performance and functionality of mobile devices, and particularly as we start to see the deployment of broadband wireless, access not only to services such as SMS, but to think about what impact cloud computing could have. So, for example, what would it mean for the developing country entrepreneur to be able to host an application related to global electronic commerce, which is now down to 15 cents per gigabyte per month. So think about all the implications of having access to all these hosted applications. The third thing that I think is particularly exciting is what has made the internet so successful is that it allows many-to-many communication as opposed to one-to-many communication, so the types of networks that Alec was talking about. And as opposed to traditional telecommunications, where the phone company gives you access to call waiting or voicemail when they're good and ready to, innovation can occur from the edge of the network. So if a 23-year-old comes up with a great idea for an application, that can proliferate very rapidly. And we're certainly moving in that direction in mobile communications as well. The fourth thing that I think is so exciting is that we're actually beginning to see real tangible economic and social benefits that are emerging from the diffusion of mobile communications. So in the area of economic growth, research has shown that a rise of 10 mobile phones per 100 people is associated with a GDP growth increase of 1.2%. The diffusion of mobile communications is improving the efficiency of markets. So in countries like Bangladesh that have an internet penetration rate of 0.03%, you're seeing the emergence of services like Cell Bazaar, which are their equivalent of eBay and Craigslist. The increased access to financial services that Alec talked about, Kenya's M-Pesa, was introduced in March of 2007 and already has 5 million registered users. The use of mobile communications and information technology to do minor things like topple authoritarian governments, improve election monitoring, improving reporting on human rights abuses, and strengthening civil society. So, although it's clearly not a silver bullet for all the challenges that developing countries face, there's clearly a huge amount of potential. And I just wanted to identify 5 initiatives or directions that the various stakeholders in this, whether it's the US government or companies and foundations like Vodafone and the UN Foundation, and developing country governments can take that will allow us to realize the potential of mobile communications even faster. One that I think is particularly important for developing country governments is to promote private sector investment and competition. So even if you look at low-income African governments, Eritrea and Ethiopia have one mobile carrier and therefore have the lowest mobile penetration in Africa. And Liberia, even though it is emerging from a long civil war, has 4 mobile carriers and have a mobile penetration that is 6 times greater than that of Eritrea and Ethiopia. So policy measures that developing countries can take, whether it's making spectrum available to multiple carriers or reducing barriers to foreign investment or making it easier to obtain a license to operate, these are all things that can increase competition, which in turn drives additional private sector investment and results in lower prices and faster introduction of advanced services. The second thing that governments can do is to reduce or eliminate taxes that disproportionately target the mobile industry, many of which are an artifact of the days in which mobile communications was considered a luxury good, which is clearly no longer the case. The third is, and this is I think an area where companies and developed country governments such as the United States and philanthropists can do, and that is to increase the capacity of developing countries to create and enable applications that meet their own needs. From Washington, we're not in the best position to figure out what the next killer application of mobile communications is. So for example, MIT has a program called EPROM, and they've developed a mobile phone programming curriculum that they're diffusing to universities throughout Africa, starting in East Africa. They also have a boot camp that gives young African entrepreneurs the skills they need to design and launch new mobile services. The third thing that I think is important is to invest in a research community in the United States and around the world that's focused on information and communications technologies for development. University-based research can train the next generation of leaders. It can rigorously evaluate the effectiveness of different approaches to using mobile communications for economic and social benefit. And it can develop new technologies and software tools. So I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to see Dan Fletcher's presentation, but this is a project that he developed in which he's turning the cell phone into a microscope, grew out of an undergraduate course in bioengineering at UC Berkeley. And finally, government should look at providing challenge grants for innovation in mobile services. So the M-Pesa case study that you heard about actually grew out of a collaboration between DFID and Vodafone, and the people who were involved in that from the Vodafone side said that DFID's willingness to provide some matching funds made an important difference when it was really the notion of using mobile communications to provide banking was sort of viewed as a far-fetched idea. So the notion of providing challenge grants to explore new applications in health, education, agriculture, small business, and financial services for the poor, I think is another important area of collaboration between government, industry, and community-based organizations. So I want to congratulate Simon and Senator Wirth and the other members of the UN Foundation and Vodafone on the release of this report, and I look forward to working with the industry to make the most in terms of the opportunities to use this new platform to improve the human condition. Thank you very much.